everybody, this is krmorrighan and welcome to my channel. Also, welcome to my face. In previous videos, I've only shown my face from like here-ish down, and originally I did that because I kind of liked the sense of anonymity. I thought it was kind of mysterious and cool, but I kind of realized recently that I didn't want people to get the impression that I was like hiding, that I maybe was embarrassed about what I was talking about, or like talking about writing gay romance or writing like adult material, that I thought like I didn't want anybody to know what I looked like while I was saying that, and I really don't want to give that impression. Also, I got new hair, so I'm feeling pretty proud of myself, so here I am, here's my beautiful self. So today I'm going to be talking about Aristotle and Dante, Discover the Secrets of the Universe by Benjamin Alire Saenz. I didn't actually read the physical copy of the book. I listened to the audiobook, and that was narrated by Lin-Manuel Miranda, who actually wrote Hamilton. So that was really cool that they got somebody who's like that involved with pop culture, I guess, to read it. I don't know. I thought it was just a really fun reading. I really liked his style of reading the audiobook, and I thought it went really well with the subject material to have him be the reader. Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. That's such a long book title. Aristotle and Dante, that's the abbreviated version. Aristotle and Dante is about two young men, boys, they're in late high school. Two young Mexican-American men living in El Paso in Texas, and the year is actually 1987, so it's set a little bit before the modern day. One of the characters is named Aristotle, and he goes by Ari, and the other one is named Dante. Book focuses a lot on their ethnic identity, and also they're kind of just coming of age, because like I said, they are in kind of late high schools, was that age when you're really growing up and figuring things out. But also a lot of it is about just like their family, especially for Aristotle, like where he fits into his family and like struggles he has with his parents. You can tell that they're kind of like trying to figure out as they get older, like why they feel differently from other boys. And it's because a big part of the setting that factors into the story is the idea of the desert. Aristotle is really interested in like the desert, and he always wants to just go and like go out into the desert and look up at the stars. The natural setting factored into their experience and their lives. And yeah, I mean, even though I said it can be like a totally different type of life from what you're used to, it's also really relatable. No matter where you grew up, you can relate to the story and the characters and what they go through. I mean, I think you really... I felt even like I said, this was totally different life experience from mine. I can totally relate to them and like what they're going through and their lives and how they feel. You know, I think being a teenager is something that's like universal across time. It's like something about that age is just like everybody kind of experiences the same like struggle and tough emotions. So I thought in that sense, just because like it was about that time in your life, it was really relatable. Aristotle and Dante are both kind of loners, so that's pretty unusual. I feel like in books, a lot of the times book characters are a little more friendly because they have to be kind of social, or else there wouldn't be any dialogue and there wouldn't be any other characters. So it was kind of interesting to see these two characters who essentially before they met each other, they didn't really have any other friends. So really, it's not like you learn a little bit about a dozen characters. It's like you learn almost everything there is to know about Aristotle and Dante and their parents, because those those 6 characters are really the only ones who you meet. So you really get to know them. And there are, there's side characters who kind of pop in and pop out, but you just, by the end of this book, it's like Aristotle and Dante are like, you know how they will react in like a bajillion different situations because you know so much about them, because you've read so intensely about them. The audiobook was 7.5 hours, so I had like 7.5 hours of like knowing Aristotle and Dante like really personally. So the plot of this book is interesting because it kind of hits you out of nowhere. At least I felt like that. It's not like in the first chapter the character gets a mysterious note that sends them on a journey. It's like Aristotle meets Dante and they're hanging out and you're like, oh, this is interesting, and then it's kind of like, bam, something happens, and you're like, whoa, and then they're just kind of hanging out and like, bam, something else happens. It's kind of how it is. It's like real life in that sense, in that you don't get like a warning and like rising action in your life. It just happens. You couldn't really just like get into the groove and be like, okay, they're going on their adventure. Okay, there's like a hurdle, but they got over it. And okay, here comes the climax. It was just like not like that. But I think that's good. Like if you really need like a really plot driven, like bam, bam, bam action book, it would maybe be for when you're in like a more calm mood, or when you're in a more like, I don't want to say quite background because it's not like background music, but when you're in the mood for just kind of like a little bit of an adventure or like a journey, just kind of go along with it, then I would definitely recommend this book for like those moments more than when you want like a, okay, they're fighting the ninja now and blah 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 blah. I don't know, like I don't really know if it's a good example, but it's more for those like ready to go with the flow moments. So when I was first reading the book, I was like, okay, so this is more one of those like really character driven books where like nothing really particularly happens, blah 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 blah. And then I was kind of like hit with all these events, and it wasn't until later, looking back, in a way that's very true to life, you know, like when you're looking back at your life, you have a totally different perspective. When I was looking back at this book, I realized those were life-altering events that we witnessed. At the time, it was just kind of what was happening, but then when you looked back, you're like, whoa, those are really a big deal. So you know that you really saw like a really important part of these characters' lives. I mean, it was like the end of high school. That's like a huge part of every person's life. I loved that that's where he chose to put it, and not when they were older and had more things established, when they were at this place in their lives where they were like scrambling for independence and like growing up and like not quite adjusting. It was really interesting. One other thing about the plot is that the characters aren't taken out of their normal lives in order for the book to happen, and by that I mean it's not like a lot of fantasy. And I don't really know about other genres, but fantasy is almost always like this, where the characters are just kind of going about their normal day-to-day lives, and then something happens, and they're like yanked into this other, maybe they're yanked into like another universe, or they're like pulled into this adventure they have to go on, or they discover that like vampires are real and they have to deal with that. Like it's often something along those lines, where the character has to leave their normal life situation in order to have the events of the book take place. This book was not like that. I mean, the characters, yes, they had to develop this friendship, which was different for them because they both normally didn't really have a lot of friends. But even though they had to sort of like change their lives, they didn't really have to like dramatically alter the way that they behaved or acted or anything like that. So I thought that was really unique, at least for me, and maybe that's just because I read a lot of fantasy. Normally the last thing I talk about is the writing of the book, the writing style. I will talk about that, but I know I mentioned in the beginning how awesome Lin-Manuel Miranda's reading was, but I want to mention it again because it was just like so fun. I liked how we did the voices for the characters, but they weren't like super exaggerated or distracting. Sometimes when I listen to an audiobook, people go like a little overboard with trying to do voices for the different characters, and I felt like he didn't do that. You can tell by his narration that he connected with this book, and you know, for whatever reason he felt that this book like really talked about something that he could relate to and talked about some part in his life. So I think that's also what gave me the sense that anybody could relate to it, because it was kind of put to me that way. Like the way it was read was in this way, like I can relate to this, so can you, and you're like, yeah I can. The writing style of the book itself, I don't think was really anything to call home about. I mean, it was okay. It was written fine, but really, honestly, I was so interested in the characters and, like, the events that I didn't particularly, like, I wasn't, like, distracted by the writing in the sense that it wasn't, like, so bad I couldn't read it, but it wasn't, like, so good that I was like, oh my god, this is so good all the time. It was poignant, definitely, in places. Like, the author's ideas were very, like, spot on in terms of describing the character's feelings and knowing like how the character should be feeling in that moment. His ideas were like perfect. But writing itself really was okay. Like I said, it wasn't anything wrong with it. It's just sometimes it felt a little clunky. I would recommend this book to really anyone, especially anyone who appreciates a good like story about coming of age. I would recommend this especially to people who have mixed heritage or people who are children or grandchildren of immigrants, it's important to learn other people's perspective. So that's really, in the end, what I would really recommend this book to was, yeah, if you're like these characters, I'd recommend it, but it's like, if you are totally different from these characters, I'd recommend this book the most, because you will read this and you will be like, yes, I feel that. Like, even though this character is so different from me, I still can feel what they're feeling, and I can still understand. And that, in my opinion, is like the purpose of reading, the purpose of books, is to experience life from someone else's view and relate to them and realize how universal, like, the human experience is. Or the alien experience, if you're reading sci-fi with aliens. So normally on my channel, I try to talk about, like, sci-fi and fantasy books, historical fiction, things that, you know, are, like, gay romance, but also incorporate, like, fantasy and science fiction themes. This book is realistic fiction. Like I said, it's set in El Paso, so it's not fantasy. But even though I really generally don't read a lot of realistic fiction, I guess I'm just, like, super easily bored. I don't know. I just don't really tend to like things that are about real life. For me, it might as well have been fantasy, because the lives of these characters in, like, Texas versus me living in New York is, like, so different. I mean, so totally different. So it was really interesting to read about their life experience. So I would recommend this book, like, either if you like realistic fiction and you feel like their lives are similar to yours, or if you're looking for a totally different perspective on what life in America can be like, or if you're not an American and you're, like, really interested in life in parts of America, I would definitely recommend it. And like I said, it can almost kind of have, like, that fantasy sort of feel if it's, like, totally different from what you're used to. This book is perfectly appropriate and is, like, written for young adults, so anybody in, like, high school I would recommend this book to, but even if you're older or, like, much older than that, I would still recommend it, because it's just a book about what it's like to be a person and all the things you're going to experience in your life and how to deal with those things. So if you read it, you might associate more with the parents and you might associate more with their perspective. So it's really got something for everyone in it, in my opinion, so if you like books, read this book. I will say, if you're looking for something that's really, like, sexy or really, like, romantic, I wouldn't recommend this book, just because they're young, so a lot of the book is about them as friends and them kind of developing their friendship and then them discovering their identity, and towards the end it kind of becomes about them figuring out a relationship. Please like and subscribe so you can keep up with all the things I'll be doing, all the different videos I'll be producing. You can also follow me on Wordpress or on Twitter or on Instagram, and buy my ebooks on Amazon, and I'll link that below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any thoughts, comments, questions, criticisms, you can comment here or email me or reach me through any of my other social media. I am ready to listen to everything everybody has to say. Keep reading and keep loving. Bye.